Hey everyone, Editing Yoyston here, and this review, we did a little bit differently. Royen has something that's going on, some scheduling conflicts today as I record this, which is Friday. So we actually recorded last night after the episode came out. We watched the episode together and recorded it, Thursday night. It's now Friday the 30th, as I'm recording this right now. However, I'm adding this in to add in what you all said on the polls, as I wanted to give you enough time to vote on the Twitter polls and the YouTube polls, and to kind of analyze that myself, as I wasn't able to do that with Royen last night. So, awesome. We'll jump right into it. So, looking at the Twitter poll first. Up on screen, right? So I have this one a little bit different than I had polls in the past. Let me know if you guys like this format better. But pretty much I have numerical ratings to kind of give everyone room to show what they think. So a 1 to 2 out of 10 is very bad. We have 10.9% of people that said that one. And then the next one is 3 to 5 out of 10, which is poor to average, 10.6%. And that's, again, about 20% from Twitter that thinks the episode was either very bad all the way to, like, poor to average, you know? And then 6 to 8 out of 10 is average to good. That is 25.7%. And then finally, 9 to 10 out of 10, which is good to great. 52.8% of people said that one. And this had 2,443 votes. So definitely leans good, right? It's like a little over 20%, which is in the bad half. And people that think that this episode was pretty bad. And then 77%, 78%, right, is says either average to great, pretty much. Average to good, good to great. And for me, I would have to say this one is like I say later on in the review, for me, this one would be the average to good category. Definitely not the worst one we've gotten so far. It's far, far better than last week's, but still, for me, not great, as I touch on in the review. A lot of the writing was not quite there to really get payoffs in this episode. But again, continue to listen for more of my full thoughts there. As for the YouTube poll, we have 28% that say 1 to 2 out of 10, very bad. 21% that say 3 to 5 or poor to average. 33%, which is 6 to 8 out of 10, average to good. And then 19%, which say 9 to 10 out of 10, which is good to great. And this is 7.2 thousand votes. So this one is more negative, as we've seen with the trends on our previous YouTube polls. With, 49% is in the very bad to poor to average side. And then 52%, I think that's 52% saying average to good to great. So it's pretty split, but you can definitely tell with, especially concerning like last week's poll and everything like that, a lot of you guys who answered the polls, you think that this is a better episode. So just wanted to add that in and share that as I get started on editing the review. So thank you guys. Enjoy. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. I am joined once more by Royen, bringing all of you a review of Episode 6 of Season 1 of Rings of Power. So we're actually doing this one a little bit differently. We've got some scheduling conflicts for Friday, the day after the episode releases, so we're doing this right after both of us watch the episode Thursday night, right after release, so it's getting to be late for us, but let's just get started. Royen, what did you think of Episode 6?
So we just got done watching it, and I would say, I think, Yoyston, you'd agree, that this was probably the best episode so far in the show. I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. This episode benefits a whole lot from there being, it's pretty action-packed from beginning to end. There's a lot of combat, a lot of dramatic scenes, things like that. I think this is the best episode yet so far. It still has a couple things that it could improve upon, but if we're at the point where I can start to just nitpick some film making and TV show making things, like, I think that's a pretty great episode, all things considered. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I think. What did you say the other episode that was close to
I think the
this one
episode that
was?
we talked about as being good was episode 4, The Great Wave. That's the one that opens with the dream. You spend a lot of time in Numenor. Um,
Oh, actually, no. I think it
was
was
it? Was
even the
it?
episode before that, 3. That one I have here that I rated kind of high.
Okay, then
That
it was either
yeah,
3 or 4. 3 was
3 or
Adar,
4.
right?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
no,
3
that
was
was
Adar.
3. Yeah, so which one was the one where Galadriel and Elendil went to the west coast of Numenor? Was that 3 or
I
4?
think that was 3. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Yeah, I think that was 3. Yep.
Okay. Then yeah, so it was episode 3 then. Oh, that's right, because 4 had a bunch of Harfoot stuff that I didn't like. That was kind of what
Yeah,
brought it
that's
down.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All
That one
right.
dragged that one down. But I would say this one is right up here with episode 3 of being one of the best, if not the best of the season so far of the show. There's definitely mostly combat, mostly action, not a lot of characterization, not a lot of dialogue and stuff like that compared to other episodes. So that kind of speaks to what this show does rather well and what the show might not. Still, for me, the biggest problems in this episode, I'm still at like a 6 or 7 out of 10 because I felt like though it was a fun one to watch, a lot of the moments weren't earned in a way that I think they could have been had characterization been good. And still, it continues to be a little bit all over the place. I mean, I've got here like with that Galadriel Adar scene, like Galadriel's a bit of a genocidal psychopath. And I'm like, yeah, that is not at all what Tolkien wrote. But we'll jump into that. This how we're gonna kind of discuss this episode even is different because two plots become one, and then we don't have anything to do with the elves and dwarves plot, which really upset me last week, so that's okay. And then nothing with the Harfoots plot, which I didn't fall asleep, so that's okay too. um,
Now, so
but
I forgot to
yeah,
mention at the top, this is not a spoiler-free review.
yeah.
I feel like I got to mention that near the beginning of each episode.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I feel like it should be clear at this point. We're doing what?
Yeah,
There are 6 one of
episode
these.
6.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I will say too that never underestimate, and this isn't just about Rings of Power in general, but it is about. Sorry, it's getting late. It's about everything in general. It's like watching it with a friend, watching it with someone that you enjoy hanging out with. Like that makes the experience better.
Oh yeah,
And
we,
so
we
maybe
watched it together.
yeah, we watched this together over Discord, so that made this more fun for sure. To where we could roast the dumb things and still kind of have fun with that, or like be talking through the scenes a bit more, which made it a lot more fun. So just generally in life, I would say don't underestimate that, because that definitely helps the experience. But still, I do. We have some nitpicks. We do have some things to go through. But overall, let's start since this episode was different anyway in terms of how to organize this review. How about let's just start with the good stuff. What did you like overall about the episode, Ryan?
So I think you mentioned this and you put this into words while we were watching. That was really good. And something that this episode does excellently, in my opinion, is that we don't just see fight scenes for the sake of fight scenes. We see fight scenes that we've been building up to, that we've been waiting for, and we got to actually see them, use their brains and see some of the tactics that are delivered here in this fight scene.
Yeah.
The trap at the beginning of the episode, it was a huge gamble, and they thought that it paid off super well. But it turns out not quite as many orcs as they hoped had died. And so when they came to attack the village, when the orcs came to attack the village that they went back to, the they thought that when Adar and his crew basically said they don't know our numbers anymore, so we can give a smaller force made primarily out of the humans that had joined their side, and let them spring their second trap on that force. And then after that trap is sprung, they don't have anything left. And that's the gamble that a defending force has when they try to do something like they did, which is allow them into the middle to surround them and then try to take them down. It's after if you don't get them all, you get hit from behind. And so
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. We saw some of that. I thought the fight choreography for some of the scenes was, I would say, meh, but a lot of them was actually pretty good, and I enjoyed that.
I love how acrobatic Arondir is, and
Exactly,
honestly, like,
yeah.
I think Arondir, he has to be my favorite character in the show.
I don't think it's all that close. I mean, I liked Isildur a lot more in this episode because he
got better.
He wasn't doing anything super annoying.
But like, even so, they kind of wrecked Gil-galad and Durin and Elrond and Celebrimbor a little bit for me last. Not so much Elrond, but like the other characters with the whole oath thing and like
that whole dinner scene kind of was
really hurt
flaming
those
wreck.
Characters. Yeah, it really hurt those characters for me. Even though I know Elrond didn't break his oath, the High King of the Elves wanted him to, which was just as bad.
Durin
so it's like those
just insulting Gil-galad and
lying about
lying to him.
And,
it's like,
yeah. So for me, I think Arondir actually has to be my favorite character because in essence, he's the most Tolkienian. He's giving these quotes about bravery and courage and trying to hold people to their best account, and then he's still humble when Galadriel shows up on the battlefield, and he's like, "Oh, Commander," right? Like he's still this humble elf guy, and I'm like, "Okay, I like you. You know, like you actually have the themes of Tolkienian courage and fighting, and like his fight choreography was pretty sick, to be honest. Pretty acrobatic, like I would expect from a more woodland sort of elf, right? A Sylvan elf. So, yeah. No, that I really like him and his character in this. Now, as for the other characters of the actual Southlands,
yeah, I mean, we talked about with Bronwyn and with Theo specifically. Like these are characters that I have yet to see anything that really pulls them apart from what I would just call generic fantasy. We have the mom, and I like Bronwyn as a character. Like, let's not get this out of this construed. I like Bronwyn, and that's cool. But I can't. If I had to go up to somebody and describe Bronwyn without saying her name or what she's from, I don't think I could do it in a way that anybody would be able to say, like, "Oh, I know which character you're talking about."
Yeah. No, I'd be like, she's the woman who's like a fighter.
She's not a fighter.
Yeah, she's like not, but whenever she has to fight, she's actually pretty good at it for some reason. Like she's killed a couple orcs.
Yeah, she whipped out that sickle in this episode and it got that one orc pretty early on. Took an arrow late, so injured reserve for the rest of the fight. But
it reminds me of like all of the posters that we looked at in February or January, whenever that was, like the sickle person.
Oh yeah,
I'm like, oh, it was her. She was the sickle person.
I forgot about all those posters.
I can't remember the nickname that you gave her, but it was something that was so funny.
I have to go find that document where I laid them all out again.
But I'm like, oh, okay, it's her. Yeah, they're okay. I'm not. That's where the weakness of this episode shines through, is because this is meant to be the pinnacle, right? If the show has been a pyramid so far of like foundation and setup, and then like medium, like mid plot line, the middle of the pyramid, and then the explosion at the top of the pyramid being the most epic and cool parts, the payoff.
Interesting word choice, given the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. The foundation of this episode was weak because it relied on characterizations set up in other episodes, which I can't really blame this episode for, but it caps out how good this episode could be because, man, I could not really care if Theo got bodied in that. It just got taken out by an orc archer, or like if Bronwyn did, other than just generic good guys getting killed by generic bad guys. I'm like, oh no. Oh, that guy. Oh, that, it would have been the same even with some of our main characters, except Arondir. That was the only character I did, like, actively was like, oh, dude, watch out. Like, you're going to be okay. But, yeah, I don't know. It's tough. You have to set up the characters really well. Otherwise, these scenes don't really work. Do you remember, Royen, you watched the full series. I only watched the first episode of Wheel of Time. But the end of that first episode where that village was invaded, and then, like, yeah, That's definitely what this reminded me of, a village getting invaded. A bunch of kind of nameless characters almost. I mean, obviously we've got a couple characters that we do know the names of, but a bunch of characters that I'm like, I don't know what's really... Like, I don't know if you're going to die. I don't know what's going on here. Like, if an arrow's going to come in and kill Bronwyn, or if she's going to survive it or whatever, but like, eh.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That episode specifically, Winter's Night, it kind of suffers because it's at the very beginning. It's the first episode of the show. You don't all the characters that live through that, the characters that are going to live because it's the first episode of the show, and it's like, all right, if anybody has more than 30 seconds of screen time and they're not a parent character, they're gonna make it out. If they're a parent character, there's a great chance they might die, but because fantasy,
for sure.
But with this
also
one,
like. Yeah, with just Amazon made up characters. Yeah,
what I see here is that when I kind of see where you're going here. It's like with the village under threat, I don't feel anything for the village all that much. I don't care that much about the village. I like Bronwyn, sure. I think Theo is I don't really care that much for him at all. Whether or not that's just child actors are typically, they really struggle comparatively to adult actors in general. That's like a trend as old as time. Or it's just...
But at the same time, like, I wonder how old he actually is, right? The actress that plays Nori, she's like 22.
Yeah. I don't know.
And so...
Theo, I wouldn't consider Nori a child character. I would consider Theo a child character. It's just when you get into Hobbit stuff, or Harfoot, sorry, and it's like the age gets so out of whack.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, he is a child actor, I would say. But
I think his character is okay. So here's where it is. All right, I figured it out because I talked about at the very beginning of this episode where it's like what this show does is they'll spend an episode, maybe two, building to a point, and then they'll resolve it very quickly and then move on and restart the whole process. That's kind of what's happened with Theo's arc. Because at first he was going to be a problem character because he's hiding this relic, he's giving into this relic a little bit, and it's all super weird and stuff like that. And then he actually had a moment where there's like a moment in episode 3 or 4 or something where it's like, oh my gosh, is he actually going to join in Sauron's cause when the villager who is on Sauron's side is talking to him? But then he immediately gives it back and he's a good character again. And he's not actually building something. I feel like he's going in like a little bit of a circle, and he's just kind of exists as Theo, and his role in the story is to be Bronwyn's kid. And Bronwyn's role in the story is to be the main human character of the storyline that stands next to Arondir. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like these are the problems I would say with the episode. It's just there's a lot of predictable scenes. But that's, I can't hold that super against it because at worst it just brings it down to average. I can't call it super bad that when we're looking at a scene and I'm like, oh, they're gonna threaten Bronwyn and then somebody's gonna crack, and then they threaten Bronwyn and someone cracks. Like that's not a dig. That's just I've seen enough media to where I can tell that's exactly what's gonna happen, and that's exactly what happens.
Or Halbrand is about to kill Adar, and then Galadriel says Halbrand, and then he stops.
Or then Galadriel's
about to kill Adar, and then Halbrand's like Galadriel, and then she stops. The tropes of it hold it down, and we've gotten some comments about this in the past of like, well, if Peter Jackson's movies came out today, like you guys would tear it apart. It's like I don't think so, to be honest. Like maybe we would be harsher on it because there's a lot of nostalgia in those movies mixed up for us. I don't know. But there are moments like that in those movies that still do bother me, in the extended edition in particular, where it's like those Hollywood moments, right? The Witch King's raising up his sword to kill Gandalf, and then he hears the horn, and then he just like flies away. It's like you had Gandalf. You could have killed him and then gone and flown away like 5 seconds later. But there are moments like that where I'm like, it's so Hollywood, especially when it's like combat.
Yeah.
that I'm just like, it's a tiring trope.
And it makes sense.
It's fine, but yeah.
Because Tolkien didn't spend a lot of time writing about combat scenes because that wasn't his thing. And so when it comes to combat scenes in Peter Jackson's films, he was kind of just running off of what he thought would work, or what he thought would look cool, or what he thought would sense.
Be dramatic enough. Yeah. Because like that moment in the book, for instance, of the Witch King with Gandalf, and then he turns around when the Rohirrim get there. It's like he had the fight in front of him. Like Gandalf wasn't in a weaker position than the Witch King, so the Witch King couldn't have just taken him out. Like it still would have been a fight, so he just turned around because that would have taken time. But it's things like that where I'm like, there are still Hollywood moments in anything where I'm just like, okay, I've seen it before, but that's okay. In here, I'm like, it leans a bit heavy on it, but again, the thing that sets this episode apart, even from not only other episodes in the series, but other fight scenes in other shows as well, is that tactics and strategies, like Royen said, were implemented, and that made this super cool. The Númenóreans using the chain to like just mow down orcs when they're riding through on their horse. I was like, fantastic, right? That was awesome. The traps, Galadriel like doing that spin trick on the horse that made her look freaking crazy, where she dodged that arrow like an elf. And I'm like,
she's using her holstered legs as the counterweight to her leaning over. Like that's a real thing.
That was awesome.
That's a real thing that humans do, and it's really cool, and I loved it a lot. It's just even more of this the strategic decisions, where it's like with Adar, you send in your grunts, they get mowed down. Yeah. It flushes out the humans, and then you pucker them with you pepper them with your arrows from the tree line in the darkness. You notice that like the orcs with the torches, they all died. The orcs in the darkness, they didn't. They were the ambush hidden from the tree line, and then you go in, and after everybody retreats into the keep, then you can just take the keep. And that's exactly what they did. Like that's just smart decision making. It's better than your average fight scene in a movie or something today, where it's just like, everybody's going to get into the middle of the town and we're just going to duke it out, and then we're going to have a dramatic finish. It's like, it's better than it truly is. And so that's something that's bringing it up. We talked about some things that are bringing it down. We haven't talked a whole lot about the Númenórean like discussions and things like that. I mean, in between the fight scenes, we had Númenórean cut-ins where we're watching them kind of approach the battle, or approach Middle Earth and then the Southlands. And there's some weird timeline stuff where the first scene with Arondir clearly has to happen considerably after the first scene with the Númenóreans, even though that scene comes afterwards. And it's like, it's just because they're trying to make it so that it's an interesting, like they have the hook of the episode, and then they do some of the more boring stuff, and then they come back. But because of the timeline, it gets just a little weird at first. And so it almost feels like that the Númenóreans are teleporting there. But again, it's pretty easily explained by just moving the scenes around in a chronological order.
Well, and here's my biggest problem with this show, not from a lore perspective, not from really even like a Tolkien fan perspective, because we've talked about, the characterization is probably my biggest problem there. Just from like a writing perspective, is that the script is lazy itself. It's like, it's the most basic form of a script that you can have, of like, oh, I need a character to be in this spot when I need them to be at this spot for this thing that I think would be cool. So we're going to find a way that's really easy to make them be at the spot where I need them to be for the thing that I think is cool. It's just like, okay, a character doesn't know this because they're not supposed to yet, or a character does know this thing because they are supposed to know this thing. Right, characters are able to either be extremely stupid at moments when we need them to be, or extremely smart and quick and teleporting when we need them to be. The plot itself, the script, is very lazy, just generally as like a blanket statement on this show. And again, not even from like just a Tolkienian point of view. It's like, because Tolkien, obviously, he wasn't lazy with his writing, right? It took this amount of days to get across Eriador, and then it took this amount of days to get across Rohan or Gondor or Mordor or whatever. He was very consistent about that kind of stuff. There's never a moment where I'm just like, how did they cross that so fast? Or how did they...
I mean, they do sprint across all of Rohan in like a day. But
Well,
they do.
so here's
But
here's the deal with that one. It's like even it's explained in the internal lore is you have Aragorn, who is the hardiest of all living men, and so take a marathon runner and then add Númenórean heritage and blood and somebody who's worked on those skills for 80 years. It's like, okay, I could buy that. A woodland elf who's 2,000 years old, I could buy that. The dwarf is the only one where it's like, okay, that's kind of tough, but he also still has stout endurance. He cares very much about his friends, and he's one of the greatest dwarves of all times. It's like, okay, right, yeah, it's a small thing, but I can buy it based on who those characters are. But like Tarmiriel being here in this moment, why? It makes no sense from a political point of view. Like, she goes off, leaves her island, which already has factions rising up between the king's men and the faithful. So you're leaving it during a time of political polarization, and to go lead a couple ships of people into a battle that you could lose because you're not bringing a ton of people. A, B, you don't know actually what you're up against, so you could die too. I don't know, why characters do the things that they do versus why they don't do the things that they don't. And again, lazy script. And that always puts the cap on how high I can rate an episode personally. Like this one, I think I'm going to rate it probably at the end of the day, probably a 6.5, and say that it's the highest rating episode that I can give it. But I'm still going to rate it low because of poor characterization in the past, lazy script writing, pretty much time travel, and just this weird stuff of just how can they cross across these planes so fast? The editing makes no sense. The traveling makes no sense. Like, it's not really grounded much there.
I think. So for me, on my side, I think that when I'm trying to rate a show, I try to think like, is there some sort of change that I would make that could make this better? And how would I do it? And for me, with this episode, just based off of the things that we built, you can't change some of the things. But I think that one thing that they could have done that would have made the episode flow better, I feel like, and we could have answered some of those questions, is I would have liked to have a scene. And this is, I think, the shortest episode so far. So I think they had some time where I would have liked to seen where the Númenóreans make landfall and set up a base camp.
Yeah.
And then Tarmiriel should have stayed there. I don't think I think that they needed her at the battle for something that'll happen next episode or the episode after that. Yeah. I think that's my prediction. But, I don't know that, so I can't really speak to that all that much. But I think it would have been a good scene, or it doesn't need to be super long or super detailed or anything like that, but just a scene that where you see them landfall, maybe you see them start to unload the ships and things like that. They talk about all right, we're going to climb those mountains. And at the early in the episode, Elendil was like, yeah, dude, it's going to take a day's ride to climb the mountains and then get into the valley. And I was like, whoa, all right.
Yeah.
But if we had seen them actually maybe sit there, pick out their path, and then, it doesn't even need to be super wild. It's just everybody just agreeing all right, we're going to go out there and we're going to be in there. You're going to be in the valley tomorrow. And that it gives more opportunity for more of our Númenórean characters and Galadriel to just kind of build a little bit more characterization. I think there's some things that Tarmiriel is, when I look at all the Númenórean characters that we're following, I feel like Tarmiriel is the weakest. She's the one that kind of goes back and forth. Is this what I would consider a problem character, someone who's working against our heroes either inadvertently or intentionally? She goes in between that and a good character. She's kind of ping pongs back and forth, where it's sometimes she's I hate you and everything you stand for, and we will not bow to you. And then in the next episode, she's all right, cool, I'm on board. What do you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I actually think that's a really good way to have fixed, if we're looking at this episode in isolation, that would have been a great way to fix the time issue and the traveling issue within this episode in particular. But for me, I think if keeping all other things the same except last episode, we didn't really need Galadriel, Elendil, Isildur, and Tarmiriel in Númenor.
No.
In my opinion, those Númenorian scenes should have just been Ar-Pharazôn and his following. and then Elendil's daughter as well. And then we could have had them traveling last episode, make landfall at the beginning of this episode, and then their arrival later on in this episode would have actually made a lot more sense.
I agree. I think that's a better way to do it. I mean, but again, like I said at the beginning, these things that I'm kind of pointing out, these things that we've talked about, I think me less so than Yoisten. These bother me less. You know, we're talking about the characterization, things like that. I think there are some problems, but they bother me less, considerably less than last episode, where I'm just numbed by the way that characters are acting. I think everybody in this episode made decisions that make sense for what their motives were and what they were trying to do. The only one that's a little weird is Galadriel and the Adar conversation. It's you know, you mentioned that like Galadriel is acting like a genocidal psychopath, and there's merit to that claim, because she's like, yeah, man, I want all the orcs dead. I will kill every orc, and then I will tell you that they are all dead before I kill you. And
and then I'll kill you.
All
it's
right.
like, whoa. And even Adar's like, dang, I thought I was the only one changed by darkness. Look at you.
And it's like,
crap.
that seems to be a theme that they're really going for, is that Galadriel is, so angry at the death of her brother that she's being almost somewhat corrupted by Shadow. That seems to be the plot line they're running with. That's what they want to do.
And I'm not going to say that there's like not a philosophical precedence in Lord of the Rings to approach this, right? Elrond says something about don't study too deeply into the works of the enemy, for that could be perilous, because we see what happened with Sauron, that sort of thing. Like it's a and Royen and I, about our D&D campaign a while ago, we talked about Nietzsche a lot, and like the whole be careful if you gaze into the abyss, for the abyss also gazes into you. If you fight monsters, ensure that you don't become one. That's pretty much the essence of the quote. And it's like Galadriel's been fighting that's what's going on with her arc, is she's fighting monsters and has spent so long doing so that she's kind of becoming one herself. Nothing at all like the Galadriel that we know from Lord of the Rings. Not at all. And that's I'm not gonna like loosen up on that, I don't think, as the episodes go, because it's to me that's crazy, right? They're making her a little bit more of a psychopath. They're maybe introducing this like love plot or weird tensionist moments between
her and
Halbrand and her. So
I don't know. I still really think that if they had treated Galadriel in the way that Peter Jackson treats Aragorn, I think that this show could have been much better. Aragorn, at no point do you actually feel like he is a problem, but he still goes through a character arc, and he still, does things that are cool. But more than anything, the way that Aragorn is written and performed, at all times he feels like the leader. That's what they want Galadriel to feel like in this show. That's what they're trying to tell us, but I feel like they're not quite showing it. And again, we see her in battle scenes, and every time she's in a battle scene, she's an absolute beast. Every single time. It's outside where she starts to talk to like things. I mean, I made this prediction at like the beginning of the episode where I was like, oh, she's going to show up in the battle, she's going to be awesome, and then she's going to say something that's, pisses everybody off, and then some man character is going to give her a lecture at the end of it. Or when I say man character, I don't mean like male. I mean a human character that's like 30 years old versus, they're going to give her a lecture, and then Galadriel's going to be like, oh man, I'm learning something today. Or, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Someone on Twitter was like, nah, dude, she's not learning, she's remembering. And it's like, I don't buy that feels even more strained than her just like learning from the humans that she's now working alongside.
And I've also seen some comments of like, well, in elf years, she's like in her early 20s, and I'm like,
elf years? There are no elf years. Like that's not how this isn't a dog that dies early, so you have to like gauge it with their lifespans. Elves don't die. That's their thing.
And
they
I mean,
don't
like,
age except with sorrow.
Well, in their first 100 years, like they do have a life cycle, and I get that. In their first 100 years of life and stuff, they develop at different rates and stuff like that. But Galadriel is still, even if you make that argument, she is still far, far beyond that in the Second Age. Even
She's
if
the
this
oldest
is the beginning
character
of the
in the show.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you count, so the thing is, you have to also take into account, it's like before the Sun and the Moon, Valian years were a lot different. And so those were even longer years. So in our years, she's already, I want to say maybe a couple thousand years old. And like, by our standards. So even if you approximate that as she's an elf and maybe that makes her like 40 or 50 or something, like I'm in my early 20s and I'm not making the decisions she's making, you know?
No.
And nor am I as good of a warrior as she is. So it's like you can't really have that.
The biggest problem with Galadriel is that as a character, they are telling us that she has seen so much. You know, that's quotes from her. She's been through so much. She's the most experienced person in the show. That's why she's the leader. But then when you think about that, you think about everything that she's had to have seen to get to this point. All of the wars, the entire First Age. She is of the Noldor. She was there. You know, you know, you talk about the kinslaying, you talk about all these things, talk about, you know, the war on Wrath, the War of the Jewels, what have you. She was present, you know? And so that is a ton of experience for us to be at this point in the Second Age where she's still learning or even remembering things, and it feels like she's fresh. It feels like she's fresh out of our officer candidate school, where she's now in command and she's learning about how to, you know, lead and how to not let the darkness take over her, things like that. It's a little bit of a disconnect, and you know, that's a whole bunch of things. I'm kind of critiquing the whole show at that point. But as far as the episode's considered, I would say that this is about a 7.5 for me. 7.5, 7.25 if you really want to get in there. But I kind of stick with the halves. So
yeah, I think I'm sticking with the 6.5 with the like asterisk saying that like this is still the best episode so far in my opinion. However, one thing, and I mentioned this to Royen while we were watching it as well, it's like I am kind of tired. It's a weird nitpick perhaps, but I'm tired of them quoting things from the Lord of the Rings. In our case, right? So we had Bronwyn quoting Sam and like his whole quote about there's a light that no darkness can touch, all of that. And he was in Mordor, but this was like an age and a half in the future, whatever it is, right? So
I'm trying to remember, was this scene predicated on Theo asking Bronwyn of an old saying from them?
Yes. It was like, what did you used to tell me when I was a kid? It was something like that.
So I feel like, you know, that could be why it was quoted in the closed captions, was like, you know, she's quoting something she said in the past. But, you know, it's thematically, I understand where you're coming from, where it's like,
because it makes what Sam says, it's like, well, wait, was Sam quoting, right? Let's say that I'm new to the books or something and I see that quote and I'm very familiar with the show. Oh, Sam was quoting Bronwyn.
Yeah, and it kind of starts to raise questions like how, if it's coincidence, it's coincidence. And this is, but if we're supposed to tie a string from Bronwyn to Sam, that's a very tenuous argument. It's like how would that idea, even over the time frame that we're talking about, how would that get there and how would that work? Yeah. Again, this is just one of those things where it's like, I guess it just doesn't bother me as much. And
for me, it was like
I respect it.
Last week we had the Bilbo poem quote, like the Bilbo poem that he made about Aragorn. We had that being quoted by the Harfoots in their song of "Not all who wander are lost," and I'm like, okay, so does that mean Bilbo quoted random Harfoot number 22 when he wrote this about Aragorn? No, it does. Like I don't like obviously, you know, these Harfoots and these characters are all, you know, not canon and all that kind of stuff, but the presupposition, kind of the arrogance in the writing, even if they're like, oh, we're trying to just pay the source material like homage and we're trying to quote it. It's like, yeah, then quote maybe things from the Second Age or things from that's contemporary with the point in the canon. Don't quote characters from the late Third Age, because then you're going to confuse people and make it seem like, oh, Bilbo was quoting an ancient Harfoot saying. That's why when I'm reading the book now for the first time, it's like, he's quoting the Harfoots when he's talking about Aragorn. That's so cool. It's like, no, I don't want a first-time reader to be thinking that, because, when I as Yoyston am reading it for the 8th time, I'm like, oh yeah, the Harfoots ripped this off or whatever. When I'm reading it for the how many ever time, I'm like, oh yeah, Bronwyn ripped this off from Sam. That sucks. It's a weird kind of smaller nitpick, but it just shows that I feel like we've talked about how they take Tolkien caricatures almost and then throw them into the script, and they're like, see, this is Lord of the Rings, see, this is Middle-earth, because we threw a quote in from Sam Gamgee or from Bilbo or whatever. And it's like, no, you're not getting it. Like, you're not supposed to quote somebody from the future, because then you're confusing the timeline a little bit, and what's that supposed to mean later? Instead, you should be speaking within the themes of the source material. If you're pulling quotes, pull quotes from the Unfinished Tales. Pull quotes from that thing. Oh, you don't have rights to the Unfinished Tales? Well, then maybe you should reconsider, doing a show in the Second Age. But that's beside the point of this one episode here. But, if I'm going to give them crap there, if I'm going to go after them there for kind of misquoting or weirdly quoting things, I do have to say that they seemed to have made the Númenóreans taller than the normal the normal Middle Earth men.
We were awesome. Trying in the last couple scenes where they're like are sitting around each other and eating. We're like in these scenes, like, it seems that they're using perspective to make them tower above them, and I like that. I think that's good.
That was pretty cool. And again, I got to give credit to that. That is super cool. However, if you're gonna do that, make the Númenóreans actual Númenóreans. Something else that I have is like, like, the Númenóreans aren't really that good of warriors. They all seem like they're really young in this army for some reason. Obviously we've got Isildur and his friends, but like, they're all pretty inexperienced seeming. I don't know. I feel like they should be actual, like, strong men, right? You should have these 6'6" Goliaths running around, at the minimum 6'6". Like, maybe they should be 7'5", 7'6". They're running around, right? They're like these 250-pound Goliaths, and they're just like throwing orcs around and just taking them down. Like, it should have been a slaughter when they showed up. Just all these orcs should have started running when they saw the banners of Númenor. And obviously you can only do so. You can't have every Númenórean be like a bodybuilder. It's as much as I might wish for. If they're gonna copy and paste characters like we saw with the last episode, this image floating around the internet. If they're going to copy and paste characters, they might as well make it Arnold Schwarzenegger, just like copied and pasted as literally every Númenórean, just him in his prime, just like hundreds of Arnolds running down. But that's as strong as they theoretically would be. And so you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, oh, well, see, we did enough. The Númenóreans are tall. Okay, well, then why was that orc, like, why did that orc immediately overpower that Númenórean rider and, like, almost kill him, like Isildur's friend? It's just weird stuff like that. These guys actually in the lore make Sauron nervous. They actually make Sauron nervous to fight, let alone his like lackeys, right? Adar's orcs or whatever, right? Like, they should be running in fear. But I digress. This is why it's a 6.5 for me. It's, you still have a lot of kind of fundamental core issues with the writing, especially, but with not only the writing from a lore perspective, but from a plot perspective, the plot writing is a little lazy, things like that. As for differences, I try to mention those, but honestly, that part of the format of these reviews is kind of
mute at this point.
It's kind of mute because it's like, or moot, because everything is different.
No, I mean, it's like this entire episode is completely original.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
I wasn't sure if this would be the invasion where they captured Sauron.
Doubt it. Because Pharazôn was there, right?
Yeah, our Pharazôn was there, and that's where I was like looking for him. I was like, no, and then Adar happened to actually not be. I'm so glad he wasn't Finrod. I'm so glad he didn't actually turn out to be Finrod. So I was worried about that.
No, I actually like that he is we talked about like basically a proto orc, and I think that's a really interesting,
pretty cool,
and pretty great idea, honestly.
But I'm curious what they're doing in Mordor in particular, because it's like...
Yeah, because his thing was like, these aren't orcs of Sauron. We don't follow Sauron. We are here looking for a home. And you actually get to see what their plan was. Essentially, was they were digging all those tunnels. Initially, you just thought like, oh, they're just trying to get out of the sunlight. But then it was all irrigation in the end. It was all irrigation to
that's what it all comes down to
bring a bunch of water into the depths of this volcano. I talked a little bit about some of the science behind that earlier. I don't really want to super get into it. It's not like way completely stupid, but it is pretty dumb. It's like movie geosciences, which is usually pretty dumb. And it was to get that volcano to explode. If that's supposed to be Mount Doom, I don't know. Maybe it subtracts a little bit from me because it sounds like a dumb way for Mount Doom to become active.
That is totally Mount Doom.
That's a dumb way for Mount Doom to become active. Anyways, so the volcano erupts, everything gets covered in ash, and then I imagine that moving forward, that is how they are going to block out the sun, is with ash clouds in the air.
Yeah.
And so that's, they're kind of just trying to build a home, but they're not preparing anything for Sauron or whatever. When Galadriel's interrogating him, and some of those assumptions we had from episode 1, especially in that anvil up in the north, were like, Sauron is telling his orcs where to go. It's like, no, that was apparently Adar, basically regrouping orcs that he felt were victimized by Sauron's pride. And he was just going to collect them all, and they were going to build their own little civilization or whatever.
And he did say at like the beginning of the episode, from the arid Mithrin, so the Grey Mountains, to some mountain range in the south or whatever. Like, yeah, they'd traveled quite far.
Uh-huh.
And so it makes sense that at least they tried different lands or something. But it makes me wonder, where is Sauron in all this? And I swear, like, he's been off screen talking to Celebrimbor already.
Yeah, I think that is... Again, I said early, I think that Sauron will be a surprise reveal. It'll be at the end of the season. It will not be a character that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think they tried other lands, because on that anvil, Adar apparently, imprinted the mountains of Mordor. So this was always their plan, was to go to this location.
That's true.
And that
makes sense. So
he
must have been gathering from arid Mithrin to...
So my question is why this area? What did they know? And again, this is all so far off of the base of this episode. We're just kind of just chatting at this point. But
yeah,
why this area? Did he know that there's a volcano? Did he have this super long idea? It's like, we're gonna get this volcano to erupt, and then we can live here. Maybe it's just maybe he had bases in it. It's like, because Sauron was subjugating these humans here, so it's at least somewhat familiar territory.
I mean the lore, and again, how much of the lore are they actually using, how much are they making up, I don't know. But in the lore, Morgoth was actually, Melkor in the Elder Days was the one who made Mordor and who made Mount Doom.
You're right. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry, it's a big yawn.
No, you're good. You're good. It's getting late. So yeah, I think that'll wrap up this episode. It's no surprise to, really thinking about it as we were talking about it, that this is the strongest, because no Harfoots.
No Harfoots. That was it.
No Durin like Elrond plotline, which for me really got on my nerves last time.
Used to be cool, no longer.
Yeah, it failed the vibe checks after last episode. So, yeah, 2 more episodes, and I'm ready for it to end season 1 at least. Who knows? Maybe season 2 will be better. We'll talk about it at the end. We'll do a live stream to wrap up the full season and the series and what we think so far in a couple weeks. But maybe season 2 will be better. Maybe they'll learn from their mistakes from season 1. Kind of doubt it at this point, but you never know. Yeah, this one was the best one. Next week we've got Galadriel getting up from Pompeii, where I'm like, dude, there's no way she's... I have that in my notes. I was like, can't believe they killed Galadriel, but
nah.
obviously not.
Obviously, we know that they, it's a question of which of the named characters, because now it looks like Arondir, Bronwyn, and Theo's storyline is done. They were their whole purpose was kind of to lead these Southlanders in the absence of any other real leader. They had this subplot with the sword that's a key.
Yeah.
All that is concluded now. So realistically, they could kill all those characters, and it wouldn't affect the plot moving forward unless they have more plans that they haven't revealed to us yet. So
that would be rough if they killed the characters after that, because I was telling you for the first half of the episode, I'm like, okay, they've got these diversions set up at Ostirith, or I think is the tower. I'm like, why aren't they running? Why aren't they abandoning this place and going west? Why aren't they leaving this area? And so if they did all of that to try to survive, and then just for Orodruin, for Mount Doom to kill them anyway, I would say that's probably weak story writing. To some degree, especially when like some characters survive, like Elendil and Isildur and Tarmiriel and Galadriel.
Yeah,
because they're story characters.
It would feel like a little bit of a premature wrap up. They were just like, all right, we're done with the toy, back in the box.
Yeah, so I don't think they're all dead.
No, I don't think any of them are dead. I don't think any character that we care about is dead. So
dead. Yeah.
Perhaps some of the Numenorians that have names but no characterization, like Isildur's friends, they might be gone.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else is going to die. We know the Tarmiriel can't die here. We obviously know Galadriel can't die here, or Elendil, or Isildur. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see where it goes. I don't actually think we'll have a whole lot of screen time with these guys next episode, because I think that they're going to try to catch us back up with the Harfoots and the elf dwarf plotline, and I am already preparing myself.
Yeah. So, well, that'll be fun to review.
Let's wrap it here then.
All right, sounds good. Royen, thank you so much for joining me for another week, man. Even at this very late hour, I've got to go. I've got to get up in like 6 hours to go teach. So I gotta go to bed here. But yeah, thank you for joining. I'm excited for next week, even if we have to deal with the Harfoots again. So, if you all would like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles through the link in the description below, or check out our merch or Patreon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons: Peter Sheppard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralick, Blair Scouten, Merten, John Hume, Sam mcbee, Matt Sibbach, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibs, Rhys Jenkins, Adam Petrlik, Brandon Glidden, Molly Sullivan, Daniel Burns, Anthony Harmon, Dorwin Gray, Arthur Merlin, DJ Vaught, and Dale Davis. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today. And I'll see you all again on Sunday with a normal lore video. You all are the best, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining us on this adventure. Until the next one.